Just so Vernon, Elvis's dad, his middle name, in case you guys didn't know, his middle name was Elvis. So that's kind of how Elvis got his name. Yeah, that's right. Cool, you got that. I bet you don't know this one. Some of the people in the room will know this one. Elvis called his manhood, let's see if you guys get this one, called his manhood something. That's right, little Elvis. That's what he called it. Just so you know, too. In 1947, Elvis was invited to a radio show, believe it or not. He was 12 at the time, to sing live. He was allowed to sing live on the radio show, but he chickened out, He didn't want to do it. He was too scared. He was afraid what they said. That's true story. You guys know Elvis loved gospel, though, I'm just kind of trying to think of different stuff, guys. So it's not going to be all a topic. It's going to go in different directions. But Elvis loved gospel. He actually once tried out for a gospel group. Ironically, he went to the Grand Ole Opry, and they told him that he wasn't ready. He should go back to driving a truck. Obviously they don't know nothing, because nowadays they let everybody on the Grand Ole Opry. But he was wanting to be in a gospel group, and the gospel group's name was the Songfellows. I don't know if you guys know that. Songfellows, you ever hear of them? I've heard of Elvis, but I've never heard of the Songfellows. But he tried out for the group, and they turned him down. Crazy as that is. Yes, that's nuts, ain't it? I can't believe it any more than you guys can. Elvis did only one advertisement. He didn't really record, commercials much. But he did a commercial for donuts. So you guys are wondering, that was a commercial he did for donuts. That was a commercial. Elvis was, he claimed he was 6 feet tall. He was sort of 6 feet tall. It depends who you talk to. He looked like he was 6 feet tall, but he also wore lifts in his shoes, but he won't tell you that. But at least that's what he said. He wore a size 11 shoe, a regular shoe, was size 11. But in actuality, his combat boots were size 12. So it's kind of goes both ways, Size 11 shoe, size 12 combat boots. He just liked loose, so he could put more socks and stuff. Okay, when he bought Graceland, there was two things he did. Him and the boys, they got into, racing little cars. So they did a little racetrack in Graceland. Made a big racetrack, a slot racetrack. But they also did something else. In the jungle room, he put a waterfall on the wall. Unfortunately, now it leaks. But when they built it, it was cool. It was a waterfall on the side of the wall. Yeah, I know, you're stuck on little Elvis. I can't believe you didn't know that. I've said that a couple times. Guys, you might not know this, but when he was recording Are You Lonesome Tonight, he wanted them to lower the lights so that it would give him the mood to sing the song. Are you lonesome tonight? Lower the lights to give him the mood. But unfortunately, he bumped in. If you listen carefully, very carefully, you'll hear it where he bumped the mic stand. Ironically, Elvis made it big in the movies. You guys know that. He made it big in the movies. I don't know, 33 movies, 31 plus 2 documentaries. He was a major motion picture star. But one of the craziest things is in 1957 they premiered the movie Jailhouse Rock, at the Lowe's State Theater. Ironically, that's the same theater that Elvis worked at when he was just a young lad, before he got big. He got fired from that job, ironically, because he was hitting on all the girls at the candy stand. That's Elvis for you. What are you going to do, This is no joke, guys. Elvis was afraid to fly early in his life. He was scared to fly. So he drove the bus or he drove in a bus. Sometimes he actually drove the bus. It's a true story. Actually, Elvis did drive the bus sometimes. That was always fun. But he did drive the bus from time to time because he was afraid to fly. But later in life, he bought a Learjet, you know, the Hound Dog, and he also bought the Lisa Marie, as you guys know, his daughter. It was a big plane. He bought that plane and he retrofitted it and put a couple $100,000 into it to make it the way he liked it. But, you know, what was crazy was one of the pilots on the plane, one of his pilots, was actually called Milo High. Milo High. M-I-L-O High. Now, if that ain't a great pilot is, I guess that's better than Crash, you know. You guys know about his pet chimpanzee, Scatter. You know, he liked to drink bourbon, get drunk. You know, he'd get drunk. The boys would give him all this bourbon and stuff. Get them completely, you know, bourbon and scotch, and they get completely blasted out of their mind. Little monkeys bouncing into stuff, you know. Boom, boom, all over Graceland and stuff. You know, it's kind of funny, but they like to see him get drunk. But, you know, the girls were, you know, there was always girls around. You know, Elvis and the guys, they always had girls around. But Scatter would look up the dresses of the girls, because he was a perv. But, you know, it's what everybody loved about Scatter, you know. It's true, though. That's what he'd do. Something you guys might not know, but Elvis was actually related to a couple famous people. You know, besides the fact that he was Elvis, you know. He was distantly related, I can say that twice, related, to Abraham Lincoln and Jimmy Carter. Elvis was actually distantly related to them. Man, I'll tell you, I can't speak tonight. You know, you guys are going to have to go down and go through the family tree about 400 miles. You'll run into that, but that's true, you know. His favorite aftershave, you know, that he'd wear, you know, when he wanted to impress the ladies, you know, make them excited, you know, was Brute. You know, he liked Brute aftershave, guys. You know, as crazy as that may sound, that's what he did. You know, there's a lot of stories about Elvis buying people Cadillacs and stuff, and he bought probably everybody in the, you know, band or all the families and friends. He bought them Cadillacs. You know, Elvis spent millions of dollars in his career on Cadillacs for everybody. But there was a story back in 1975. Hold on, I think my screen went out. You know, he was buying several Cadillacs at this different place, you know, that he used to buy them from. And you guys probably heard the story, but there was this beautiful black lady that was looking through the window. And she said, you know, he came up to her and he said, honey, what are you looking at? And she said, I'm looking at that beautiful car, Elvis. And he said, you like that car? And she said, yeah, you know, maybe one day I can get a car like that myself. And Elvis said, honey, it's your lucky day, because today's the day you're going to get that car. You go inside and they'll take care of you. That's a true story. He did that for her. And Elvis had a heart of gold, no doubt about it. Elvis was also a boxing aficionado. He liked Muhammad Ali. He liked Muhammad Ali a lot. So in 1973, I believe it was, he gave Muhammad Ali this robe. You know, I believe it was a white robe, and it said something like the People's Champion. People's Champion. And Muhammad Ali wore that robe when he fought Kenny Norton. Do you guys remember Kenny Norton? You had Joe Frazier, you had George Foreman, you had Kenny Norton. They were all really bad, you know. Kenny Norton was a bad guy, trust me. He was a hard-hitting guy. There was some hard-hitting people back then, man. I'll tell you, whew, I wouldn't want to get in the ring with any of those guys. But Kenny Norton is who Muhammad Ali fought at the time. And unfortunately, Kenny Norton whipped his ass. Good. Muhammad Ali lost. So, at that point, you know, Muhammad Ali said he wasn't going to wear that no more. He thought it was cursed or something, unfortunately. So he never wore that robe ever again. But it was a robe that Elvis gave him, so, You guys know that Elvis wore a Hebrew cross, and it's called the Cha. It's a Jewish star. The Star of David. Elvis wore this cross for a reason, and people asked him once, "Why do you wear that cross?" Star of David and everything. He said, "I don't want to miss out on heaven on a technicality." He's always making sure he crossed his I's and dotted his I's and crossed his T's, or crossed his T's and dotted his I's. I don't know, something like that. And last but not least, guys, this is what I'm going to close us out on. You guys know the story about how Elvis passed away and all he said, and how he was in Graceland, and Ginger Alden was there. Ginger Alden was a beautiful girl, and Elvis did actually love her. I don't know if you guys realize that. And Ginger Alden, Elvis said, "I'm going to go to the bathroom." And he was reading the Scientific Search for the Face of Jesus. Scientific Search for the Face of Jesus was the book he was reading. That's the book he took from his nightstand beside him, where he kept some of his books. And he went into the bathroom. But as he was going, Ginger said, "Don't fall asleep, Elvis." And Elvis said, "Okay, I won't." Those were Elvis's last words. "Okay, I won't." But on a better note, before he did that, and before he played racquetball, and with his cousin, and before he went up to Graceland, and before those words were ever uttered, Elvis had a meal he ate. Now, this is a true story, guys. His last meal, you guys are probably, the goofy thing is everybody's like peanut butter banana sandwich. He didn't eat peanut butter and banana sandwiches that much, guys. Yes he did, but not that much. And he didn't eat bacon all the time and all this stuff. He did eat a lot of calories on a given day. He did eat a lot of calories. Thousands and thousands and thousands of calories. But that's because Elvis was from the South and he loved Southern cooking. And he had a great cook who did cooking for him. And anybody who was at Graceland knows just how great that cook was. But his last meal was 4 scoops of ice cream and chocolate chip cookies. That's the last thing he ate. And that's true. Alright, guys. So hopefully that answers a few of your trivia questions for you. Did he really have a bad heart? Yes, he did. Did he really have glaucoma? Yes, he did. Did he really have an enlarged liver? Yes, he did. Did he have a lot of medical problems? Yes, he did. Was he an insomniac? Yes, he was. Did he have bone cancer? We'll talk about that some other time. But with that said, Elvis did have a lot of medical problems, and before I go, I wanted to say this. I wanted to clear this up since I just said what I said. Elvis was not a drug addict, guys. Elvis did not die because he was a drug addict. Elvis had a lot of medical issues. A lot of them were brought on by his lifestyle. A lot of them were brought on by how he lived his life on the stage. But he did have a lot of medical issues. And most of the prescription medication he took was for these different problems he had. Elvis had a mastery of medications as far as knowledge. He knew numerous things about medications. He was probably as well informed as a doctor. He knew what they did, how they worked, what kind of science. Elvis did not get into, illegal drugs. He wasn't into heroin or LSD. The only thing he took that was close was what would be considered liquid cocaine. But it wasn't because he was into cocaine. He didn't take cocaine, guys. He took it for pain. And it was prescribed. Everything Elvis did was prescribed. Nothing, Diladads and Placidyls and all this stuff, they were all prescribed. Elvis was not a drug addict, and anybody that tells you he was, is a lying piece of shit. and I tried to keep from cussing tonight, but I really get irritated when people call him a drug addict, because he wasn't. He was a guy who took pills because he had to. Elvis had a lot of issues. And you want to know why he had a lot of issues? With medications and stuff, and problems and medical issues? It's because he gave everything he had. He left it all out there on the stage. He gave his fans every bit of what he had, every bit of himself to his fans. He gave his whole heart, his whole soul, and his whole body to take care of his fans, because that's what Elvis was all about. He was about you, everybody out there. Elvis loved all of you. Trust me when I tell you. And with that, we're going to close up the room, guys. And that's why we all love Elvis, and that's why we'll always stand behind the man, and I will always be here, no matter what, for Elvis Presley, guys. Hold on one second, Priscilla. What about Priscilla? I'm going to answer that question real quick. Yeah, you know, guys, just so you know, Ginger all gets a bad rap. I just wanted to say that, you know, for whatever reason, and she shouldn't have. She was a young girl. And at that time in Elvis's life, he really needed somebody to love. And he really needed somebody that loved her, and loved him, loved him. She's asking, did he abuse her? Did he abuse Scylla? No. Elvis didn't abuse Scylla. Elvis had a bad temper, and there were a few moments in Elvis's life where he allowed his temper to get the best of him. But let me ask you this. Would Priscilla still be trying to help the estate of Elvis Presley? Would Priscilla still be trying to talk good of Elvis and always back Elvis and all that if Elvis was ever really that bad to her? Priscilla loved Elvis. Elvis loved Priscilla. They had a mutual falling out. They got divorced as friends. And they moved on. But Elvis, to his dying day, loved Priscilla. Let me explain something to you. There was a story, you know, since you mentioned this, I was going to close, but since you mentioned it, I want to explain this. This is a true story. Elvis, late in his life, wanted to go back to Priscilla. He wanted to get her back. He loved Priscilla. That was the mother of his child, you know. Lisa Marie. He loved Priscilla. He didn't want to lose her. He lost her. He didn't think he would lose her because he was Elvis Presley. I'm Elvis, so I'm not going to lose her. She's not going to leave me. But she did, you know. She grew up and she left him. And he was heartbroken when he finally realized that he was this 40-something-year-old guy, and he had lost the love of Priscilla. And he was supposed to be the king of rock and roll, you know, the big man, you know, and all that. And all these guys are telling him how great he is, but he lost it. Priscilla, he couldn't quite figure that. He couldn't put his head around that. So he went to her house, and he asked her to come back to him. And the guys were behind him. The guys were at the car. You know, they're talking to themselves. You know, they did. And Elvis looked at Priscilla and he said, "Would you come back to me, honey?" He, you know, explained how everything was going and how, you know, he was no longer really able to be himself on stage anymore. It was more like the show had become him, you know, he had become a caricature of himself. He wasn't exactly able to be this vibrant Elvis Presley anymore. He had to put on the scarves and give scarves to the girls and kiss them, and his show had kind of become a charade to some extent to Elvis, which is why Elvis kind of lost interest and wanted to go in different directions, which would have been movies, you know, if Colonel Tom Parker wasn't a money-grubbing piece of crap. But, you know, Elvis decided, you know, I'm going to do what's right, and I'm going to go back to her, and I'm going to beg her back. And he did. And this is a true story, guys. He looked at Priscilla and he said, "Would you come back to me?" And she said, "Elvis, I'll always be a fan of yours. Yeah. But I can't do it no more. I can't do that lifestyle. I can't be a part of that. I'll always be here for you, Elvis, but I can't." And at that moment, Elvis knew that he couldn't have Priscilla back. And all he wanted to do was make sure that the guys behind him, this is true, this is really sad, guys. He wanted to make sure that the guys behind him could see her hugging him. He goes, are they looking? Are the boys looking at me, honey? Are they looking at me? And Priscilla said, yeah, Elvis, they're looking at you. And then he walked away, and he kissed her, and he walked away. And he went to the limousine, and you know, I think it was Joe Esposito that asked him, Elvis, is she coming back to you? And he goes, I don't know, man. I don't know if she's coming back. He knew she wasn't coming back. And that's when he had to move on. And that's when Ginger Alden came into his life shortly after that. And he needed somebody at that point, guys. And Ginger Alden was a spitting image of Priscilla when she was young. You know, dark hair, you know, beautiful girl. And Ginger Alden, you know, was going to fill that void for him. And he actually asked Ginger Alden to marry him. And they were going to get married at one point there in December 25, which was Christmas Day of 1977. They were going to get married. Of course, you know, Elvis passed away prior to that, but they were going to get married, guys. So, but what you were saying about Priscilla, just keep in mind, would she be doing what she's doing today if Elvis had abused her in any way, shape, or form? Like I said, Elvis had a like everybody, he had a, you know, he'd get mad. Elvis had a heck of a temper at times. And, you know, there's things I'm sure that Elvis would regret doing or saying, which we all do at times, you know, but Elvis did not abuse her. You know, just so you know. But with that, we're going to close up the room, guys, and I know I was a little long-winded, but hopefully you guys don't mind. I told you guys I would tell you stuff from time to time. So that's what that was all about. So thank you so much. Yeah, okay. And I love you all. So thank you so much to Kahela being in the room, Barbie and your mom. I know your mom's somewhere else, so we'll all say a prayer for her. And Evie, thank you so much. Peg, Linda, John, thank you. I appreciate it, John. What I was saying about Ginger Alden's all true. You know it's true. And a little bit of Angel, as always, thank you so much. God bless you. Happy birthday, Lil. And with that, we're going to close up the room, everybody. God bless you all. Thank you so much. God bless Elvis. We'll be back tomorrow night. Same time. Same place. Good night, everybody.